the Boers were planning to go on a third Boer war against British. Very few people know this. But in 1905, the Boers started talking about going back to war against Britain. Now, the reason being that, the Boers didn't lose their freedom. If you look at the Treaty of 1902 at Vereniging between the British and the Boers, that treaty was very close to not being signed because a lot of Boers rejected it, and De Wet as well, because they said we will not give up our freedom. It was like a seizure of hostilities. Actually, it was not a handover, because the 7th article said that at the earliest possible date, authority will be given back to the Boers of the Free State and Transvaal that will lead up to self-government again. And this never ever happened again. But that is written in that document. And the Milner in 1907 wrote in a book called Milner's Young Men, the only way to destroy the Boers is Britain will never be able to have another war against the Boers because Britain will be devastated. And you must remember that Britain had close to 500,000 British troops in South Africa, and not 370,000, something like you see on the video of the song Delaray. And there were 80-something thousand Boers in the war, in the start of the war, but at the end, the bitter enders, like you call yourself a bitter ender,
yes.
There was around about only 18,000 fighting the British in the last year of the war.
Oh.
So you understand which way I'm coming from?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Now, you can ask questions, sorry, in between, because I'll just keep on talking, sorry.
Hey, if you'd like to address, before we go any further, and I'm sorry I didn't mention it when you first came on, please tell our audience about your internet radio station. And if you want to do it in Taal, in Taal, please go ahead and do that.
I may do it in both languages. I started an internet radio station for the Boer Nation. It is the only station that broadcasts for the Boer Nation. At the moment, we have Afrikaans music, which is our language that we speak, and we're planning some programs in this year. And thank you very much, Frank and John. In Afrikaans, hierdie is Boervolk Radio. Ons het 'n radiostasie begin so 10 weke terug, en ons saai hoofsaaklik Afrikaans uit, moontlik 1% Engels. En ons is besig met programme opstel vir hierdie jaar, en ons hoop jy kan daarna luister. Die radio is by www.boervolkradio.co.za. The radio station can be found at www.boervolkradio.co.za. Boervolk Radio is spelled BOERVOLKRADIO. Thank you, Frank.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Nice job.
We want everybody to know about your station. And you said that the government may give you a problem because they want to start. I never heard of anybody having to have a license to do an internet broadcast. I never heard of that. There's no such thing like that in America.
Yeah, well, this is not America, Frank. Even in the previous National Party government, you could not get a radio station license unless you went through very, very strict and scrupulous things. Actually, there were no radio stations allowed under the national government, except the stations that were there, like the official radio stations of the government that the government had introduced. And people battled. Then at one time, there was a radio station in Lorenzo Marx. They were kicked out of the country. They were in Mozambique, but they were very liberal. Right. And then, of course, in the late 80s, you had a 702 radio station, also very liberal, and they got a license. And today you've got hundreds. There's plenty of licenses for normal terrestrial radio stations. But then internet radio station is, at the moment, is free, like you believe it, and everybody believes that it's free on the internet. But they are going to introduce licensing. They're talking about it. They're thinking about it. And when I went to register for copyright people said to me, well, we hope you get a license because they're looking at licenses in the future and you'll have to apply for it. So I said, no, fine, we'll do it. But not worried about that too much, because of the day they do that, I'll take the radio station and move it overseas and broadcast from island off the shore, off the coast or something, so.
That's right. Well, being that we are told that the so-called new Zuid-Afrika is a democracy, why would they want to stifle freedom of speech? I would imagine that Mbeki and his boy, his opponent Zuma, they're for freedom of speech, but they're only for freedom of speech when it's for them or their supporters.
Yeah, I think you're quite right there. That, as far as we know, they've also got a sort of group of people who sort of constantly look at the Boer problem. There was a lot of betrayal in this country, and in 1994 there was talk about the so-called Volksstaat, which was a scam which was brought about by Mandela and, of course, old military General Viljoen, and whereby they was said that through the Constitution, Article 235, I think, or 285, I'm not sure, I'm not a constitutional person, but they mentioned that we will be able to sort of ask and get a little Volksstaat somewhere. But this is just a scam to keep the people happy,
Nelson Mandela involved in a scandal?
Saint Nelson Mandela?
So-called saint, sorry about
Even that other two-bit little creep, Desmond Tutu.
Yeah, little worm. He comes out with a book about how he wanted to be a teacher, but under apartheid he couldn't. So he went to England, became an Anglican minister, came back, though, and taught in an Anglican school. He never mentions that there was total religious freedom, even under apartheid. They never mention that. I figured it out myself. I said, wait a minute. You have the Hindus, the Hindi on the Natal coast. You have the pagans, among the blacks. You have Jews in Joburg. You have, there's no, that government, the Boers never said to anybody, you can't practice any religion. You had total religious freedom over there. And this phony comes back, and he was able to move up in the